Let's talk to George Boubouras, Head of Investment Strategy at UBS in Australia. George, hi. Thanks very much for joining us.
Hi.
Is this result, George, bad news for stock investors?
Well, clearly in the short term, any form of uncertainty is a concern for investors. It's a concern for anyone who takes risk on board. But it's important to clarify this. Australia is a Westminster system. In a Westminster system, just like in the UK, there are very clear protocols in a hung parliament. So while Australians on the weekend voted for their first hung parliament since 1940, and there is that degree of uncertainty which we'll discuss and its impact on markets, the process of what happens and the responsibility of the caretaker governments and the opposition in the process of forming a viable government is very clear, and everyone understands the process. So there's no uncertainty there. It's just an uncertainty today on who will be in power in the next week or so.
Yeah, and what does it mean, George? I mean, there are alternatives. Depending on which potential outcome, what would the likely effects be on the markets?
Some big effects. Obviously, we can turn towards the UK example of a hung parliament. However, the difference there is that the Conservative with the Liberal Democrats voted in one block. In Australia, there's two scenarios. We estimate 73 lower house seats to the caretaker Labor government and 73 lower house seats to the Conservative Liberal National Coalition. That leaves 4 seats outstanding, 150 seats in the lower house, 76 majority. It's interesting in that one of those seats is a Green seat, the first Green seat in Australia's lower house history. That's in the seat of Melbourne, and they have made a commitment before the election to side with the caretaker ALP government. So that goes to 74. They're still too short. Interestingly is on the other side, the 3 independents are effectively all ex-Conservative National Party members, historically, variations of it, of course. And one would find it very, very difficult for their constituents who would have a small vote for the existing caretaker Labor Party to side with the Labor Party. But nevertheless, we're estimating that in the scenario of the Conservative Liberal National Coalition with the 3 independents who are conservative in nature, gets it to the minimum of 76, which implies it's positive for the resource sector for mid-caps, because they've spoken about dropping the mineral resource rent tax, which replaced the RSPT, so that's good for companies in iron ore and coal. In the scenario, which is still unlikely for us, if they side with the caretaker Labor government, that will go ahead, and that will be a negative to the resource sector. So there are major implications, and it will go 2 different ways for the market.
And very quickly, George, I mean, those are the implications for the mining sector, for stock investors. What about the economy, very, very quickly? I mean, it's been one of the strongest within the G20 spectrum. Is it still on the right path, no matter who wins this election?
Yes, we believe so. 3.8% growth for the 3.3% growth for the Australian economy calendar 2010, 3.8% 2011. We're very much a function of the emerging world, the terms of trade shock. China, India, China our #1 trading partner, China the #2 largest economy in the world. That is our long-term and medium-term driver for Australia.
George, thanks for joining us. George Boubouras there from UBS.